Hi everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Fran Halsall. I'm a three-time Olympic swimmer and world champion. And for me, mindset was massively important in my sport. And it's always interested me, the aspects around elite mindset and what the methodology is to growth and success and how people become successful in every industry, every walk of life. And I want to see what the kind of similarities and differences are between people at the high end of business being really successful, driving things forward, and the mindset that it took to be at the elite end of sport. So joining me today to talk through his mindset is Neil Ginger. He is Origin Global's CEO. Origin was founded in 2001 and Neil's been at the helm of the ship ever since. So for 19 years. How are you today, Neil? Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Fran. I'm wonderful, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. And what I'd really like to talk to you about today specifically is basically the ups and downs of overcoming challenges. And because you've expanded the product range of what you do, you've expanded into other countries. And so it's obvious to me that you've had a very clear strategy for staying ahead and for progressing forward. So that really interests me, and your mindset behind how that strategy comes about, what you think about, how you go about dealing with things that when all different moving parts are changing. So, but first, can you just tell us all a bit about Origin, like where it's come from and where it's at now?
Sure. I was working with my father and my uncle. They have a construction business, or had a construction business, building indoor swimming pools. So very high-end domestic building projects is really what they were taking on. And you're always constantly trying to make sure that you're up with construction trends and building trends and all of those things, particularly when you're working for very style conscious people who want to have, they're constantly updating properties and doing those things. They're not constrained by perhaps so much the financial side of making sure their home is how they want it. They just, they're ready to get those projects going and to do them. And they're always looking for something a bit different and a bit new. And we'd come across bifolding patio doors. And at the time, so this was pre-2000, this was back in this kind of mid to late 90s. And we'd found some bifolding doors, and every client we showed them to absolutely loved them, thought it's fantastic, it's just what we want in our swimming pool building, we'll get those. And what we discovered that they were really, really hard to buy in England. There was some German manufacturers at the time supplying into the UK, but not in any great volume, and not with products perhaps specifically in the way we expect to use them in England. And I think through just pure frustration of having a product that people wanted to buy but not being able to get it, kind of drove us to look at making our own. And looking back, it's wonderful when you're unconstrained by what you don't know. There's no we get so constrained by the things we know and by the information we have, and you can't do that because of whatever it happens to be. And it's just so wonderful when you've got a naivety about you that just says, well, we'll just do that and then we'll work it out as we go along, and it'll be fine. So we sat down, we put a product design together, had really no idea what we were doing at the time, but managed to kind of bumble away through it and ended up with a product that worked really well. And then, I think it's fascinating that you're trying to draw the comparisons between sport and business, because there are so many. Particularly when you're performing a sport at a very high level, which, I play tennis to a reasonable level. So I get some of the steps and processes you go through to get good at a sport. And there's probably none more valuable than the monotony of doing something over and over and over until you're good at it.
Yeah, processes are key, aren't they?
They really are. And just understanding that even something really simple that you already consider yourself to be extremely capable at, if you do it over for hours and hours on end every single day, a year from now, you will be significantly better at it, no matter how good you were when you started.
And is that the mentality that you take with like everything that you do? So obviously with tennis, you understood that having to go again and again and again was what you needed to do to become successful at something.
Yeah, and you're trying to find some of the simple things, some of your disciplines that you can't do it without finding the disciplines, right? So the disciplines become the things that you must do, and then your marginal gains and your creative part and all the rest of it are the things that you've got to add in at some point to try and get an edge or to do something a bit better. And business is the same. You're trying to find the simple things that you can do really well, that everybody can do really well. You know, with a little bit of practice, everybody can sit and do quoting well, and all those. So you're looking, you know, for us in the beginning, it wasn't the administrative side that was a challenge, really. It was more the manufacturing side. So it was finding the disciplines in that allowed us to run that with a little bit of consistency. Because the early days it was up and down. You know, it was good 1 minute, and then we were caught out because we hadn't performed perhaps some of the disciplines well. And you get, you know, we're humans, so we like to make things more complicated than they are often too. You forget to do some of the simple things really well, and we do the really complicated things well instead, whilst ignoring all the simple stuff that actually is required.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I always, in my training, went back to the drills and skills that I did in my first swimming lessons. I had drills and skills I saw toddlers doing that I still did as part of my everyday routine, because that's what you need to do. You've got to be consistent throughout those, haven't you, to be able to then go on to the bigger stuff, the marginal stuff.
I think so.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're drawing from an example. You see somebody doing something for the first time, and do you know what? I've stopped doing that. I need to get back to that. I need to add that back into my routine and make sure that I'm covering those things off. And I think business is a lot the same. And I think in this modern world where we have access to any bit of information you want, you know, if you want to look something up, you can look something up, and you know, you can get good information, bad information, and everything else. And of course, you can overthink what needs to be done. And you know, I often get asked, you know, what do you think is the most important thing when you're starting up? Well, actually, the most important thing when you're starting up is becoming profitable as quickly as you humanly can. Yeah. Because spending other people's money and investors' money is just going to dig you a hole that might just be too difficult to get out of. And also you become beholden to other people's ideals and other people's way of doing things, which, you know, if you've got a clear vision, you don't want those things in the way. You want guidance from people, of course, but you know, when people's money is on the line, they have a tendency to look at things slightly differently.
That's very true. And so the concept of Origin came about.
Yes.
You took the leap into manufacturing a product that wasn't being made in the UK at all, was it?
Yeah, really very, very little. There was some examples of other products being made, but the products were... I don't like pointing the finger saying they were really poor, but I think compared to where we are now with bifold doors, they are. And there was an opportunity for us to bring a slightly more appropriately domestic product to market, if you like. And that was, you know, those were the key drivers for us when we were doing the design for our product, and that was the opportunity we saw. Yeah.
And then, so obviously then you've expanded out, you've gone into making windows, front doors, you've gone into different countries. I know for me, when I was swimming, I had to constantly change up my training and do different things to get better, to improve. Would you say that, what have you learned through the process of venturing out into different products and different, like it's different markets, isn't it? And there must be a completely different way of dealing with people in the Middle East, dealing with people in like Florida, as there is people in the UK. Like, what were the learnings that you took from all this?
I think the learning is, well, it's vast. I mean, you're learning something new every day. I think the first region we expanded into was out to Dubai, into the Middle East, and again, unconstrained by what we didn't know, but uneducated by what we did, and we soon learned that the marketplace there was so very, very different, and so very difficult to understand compared to the marketplace that we did know. And we constantly in the early days fought with that, in terms of how to approach it, how to deal with people, what the motivators were for people to buy, and who makes the decisions in the whole piece. Because it feels like, as always with a product, you should be selling it to the person that's going to be using it, but they're not always the people making the decision. They're very often easily influenced by someone in the chain. And I think your dad actually is constantly saying, you've got to influence the influencers. And finding those influencers, I think sometimes is harder than you'd like it to be. It looks like it's the influencers here, and then sometimes it turns out they're not the person influencing the piece in the puzzle. And
would you say, like, so when we talked earlier about it being fresh, new, and not actually knowing what you were doing to start with, made it kind of easier to get going? I call that the toddler mindset, because it's the same with me in sport. If I hadn't done it, if you don't know how to lose, then you're not scared of losing. If you don't know it's going to hurt when you jump out of a tree, you'll jump out of the tree, won't you? It's like, we call it kind of the toddler mindset, that you just confident, you go into it, you just get going with it because you don't know anything else. Would you think that this mentality that's been the same approach going into different markets and into different products, or had you learned that was what was needed?
Certainly with Dubai. Obviously, when we then branched out into the US, it was obviously slightly different. We'd done the expansion into a region, so I knew to be very careful to understand that I wasn't going to understand the market immediately, that it was going to take time to work out what you need to do to be able to approach it. And so initially it's just understanding that hard work and grind is going to be the thing. We're going to need to speak to everybody. We're going to waste a lot of time chasing things that turn out to be liabilities, not opportunities. And of course you approach it differently when you're expecting some of it to be different, and not always in a good way either. Experience works in two different ways, I find. Sometimes it's really helpful, and sometimes it just gets in the way. So you have to constantly just challenge yourself. Okay, well, my preconceived notion was this was going to happen, and now we need to adapt a little bit better. But I think the biggest thing I've learned is whatever decisions you're making today, 5 years from now, they will mostly look ridiculous. And you're really going to need to get used to that.
Do you think it's the process and the doing things the same daily that keeps you going and keeps you motivated to do what you're doing? Or is it the expanding into new areas, trying new things? What's the thing that keeps Neil motivated day to day after 19 years doing what you've been doing?
I don't know. I'm just motivated to get up and do it. I wish I could pinpoint that. I'm very much, if there's something to work on, then I'm going to get in amongst it and work on it. And if there's a project needs doing, I'm going to sit there until the project's finished. And I actually find that very difficult to balance the work life to get that work-life balance right, because I like to start a project and just keep going until it's done.
Yeah.
Because I'm also aware that if I stop a project when it's 90% finished, the last 10% is almost impossible for me to get done.
You're already on to the next thing then.
Yeah. So it's very difficult once I had the children in my life. It's very difficult to stay at work I can't stay at work till 10 o'clock anymore. So, I like to be able to get on with something and just keep going with it and just get it done. So I think when there are projects on, and when I've got a clear vision of how to start it and how to get to the end of it, I'm reasonably well self-motivated. But yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy the people I work with, lots of family, lots of friends. I think people talk about working with family as being an additional challenge in and amongst it all. And I get that. I do, because we have a tendency with family. You're confident enough that you can say anything to your mum or your dad, and they're not going to love you any less, right? So you're not nearly as careful when you're talking to loved ones as you are with perhaps work colleagues. And so, of course, you can overstep the mark. But as long as everybody understands that, sometimes it's either frustrations or whatever it happens to be. But if you can understand that working with anybody, everybody becomes close. People I've worked with for 10 years, you build really intimate relationships with those people. And I think if you're comfortable with that, then the motivation to want to go and hear what they have to say and see their point of view and challenge what they've got, or to allow them to challenge you. I just really enjoy that piece. And we've been very fortunate that we've had enough profit within the business, if you like, to be able to invest in good management and good people around us, which has allowed me to sit in a position where I can do lots of the things I actually enjoy.
Yeah.
And I don't need to do some of many of the things I don't. HR.
Yeah, no, because I was speaking to my other half, who obviously, John, I spoke to him before I spoke to you on one of these, and he actually said that in his team with his business in Manchester, he says that he's all for self-improvement, but sometimes you spend so much time working on your weaknesses and the 1% that you can get better, that you forget your strengths and you don't use them as much as that you should. So he said that he likes to bring in other people that are knowledgeable in those areas that aren't his strengths, so he can go off and do the bits that he's really good at and really wants to get stuck into. Without doubt.
I mean, that's it. Probably, build a team around what you can't do, right? Yeah. So if you're clear and you're confident in the thing, in the vision that you have, then concentrate on those things, because invariably, if you're running a business and it's going okay, you've probably got those things right. The proof is in whether it's going right or whether it's going wrong. And then, of course, you need people in place, to do the things that either you're unmotivated by. For me, the biggest HR legislation, I don't understand it. Right, even the ethos behind it, I can't get with that at all. So I need people to be able to perform in those areas of the business in ways that I can't and don't. I just, it's a bit of a giggle higher up in management at our place. They all tease me over it because they know it's just, I don't understand why we have to do certain things. And so, of course, you can't hang on that. You just got to let capable people do their thing. So, yeah, build a team, and don't be scared of what you can't do.
Yeah,
don't have to be excellent at everything either. That's the other thing. That's what other people are for.
That's so true. And on the theme of teams, when I was swimming, I obviously had to have a team around me. I had to keep in formation, making sure that everybody was on board, developing ideas and moving things forward, learning, improving, so that to improve my swims. How do you bring everybody in the business on board with the journey that you see Origin going on and what you want from the company, the ethos of the company, and taking it forward to greater successes?
Yeah, I think lead by example. You know, you can't sort of point the finger and expect everybody to do everything for you, and you know, get frustrated when they don't. I think you know, we try to include everybody. We try to sit down and make collective decisions. So involve people in perhaps the direction of the decisions you want. I think it's harder sometimes to deliver something when you've got a clear mindset on what we're doing, and people aren't perhaps fully on board with that. It's harder to bring people along and to convince them. So you've got to demonstrate that something can be done, right? So you have to be prepared, I think, to roll your sleeves up and work in it, and work with somebody to overcome challenge to get something where you want it to be. And don't ever be afraid of that. I'm not above rolling my sleeves up and going in a factory and working on the production line if that's what's needed at that moment. So yeah, I think getting people included is really important with the team, so that we reach an understanding as to why we're making a decision. This is the approach, right? Let's go collectively work on that and deliver together. And you know, and it's fun. Typically, if you've collectively made a decision, it's fun going on the discovery part of, oh, it was a really terrible decision, you know, and we all live and die by the decisions we made, you know. But as I said before, you know, 5 years from now, a document that you sit down and write today, particularly strategy-wise, you have a tendency to look back on those and think, goodness gracious me, I really had no idea what I was thinking of doing. But again, it demonstrates the power of having a vision, and you go off down that path and you chase that path, and you know, don't hang on to decisions that are wrong for too long either. Let go of those. I've just learned.
Would you say that's the key? Because obviously Origin's been around through 2008 where we had a recession. It's going now, and from what I hear, it's doing really well now through a pandemic. How do you think the vision is what has seen you through the difficult times, or is it the fact that you can embrace that, yeah, this is difficult, roll my sleeves up, and it's just not getting emotional about it and you just take a very logical approach to it?
It's difficult because not getting emotional about it. You know, I can sit here and tell you that I was at the point of crying when I had to send 250 odd people home and furlough everyone. That was just the hardest thing and the hardest decision to make. So, you know, the emotion is there all the time. And when it's, you know, particularly when it's personnel, when it's people you're working with, you know, like I said before, you build really deep relationships with people, and then of course it's really tough to take on some of those things. And I think what generally happens there is that emotion runs higher than almost anything else that's going on, and terrible decisions and terrible discussions are had, and it's just makes it very, very difficult. So I think trying to take emotion out of it, for me, is almost impossible. I find that really, really difficult to do. And I actually find I'm better if I allow the emotion to be part of it. Okay. You know, you know, it's one of the advantages of working with family. So Victoria, for example, knows me really, really well, and she knows when to let me rant and when to be frustrated and when to be annoyed, and when to agree with me and when to say, hey, you're being ridiculous, don't be like that. So yeah, working with my father and my uncle are just wonderful sounding boards on that front. But particularly my dad. My dad's one of my best friends as well. So, pick up the phone to him and tell him what's going on, and he sits and he listens, and always has something good to add in. So the emotion, I would say, if that's something that is part of your personality, it's part of your makeup, and it helps you get to a point where a clear decision can be made, then let that be part of it.
Yeah.
And don't run away from it. Don't be scared to not show emotion. I think it helps everybody to understand what the direction is you're trying to get to.
And I think it's it's a bit of a lonely world as a CEO, isn't it? There isn't really many people that you can soundboard off. There is sometimes a fear to show your emotions because you want to show that you're a strong leader. But do you think it is important to have people around you that you can, like, do you have people that you go to and soundboard off and you respect their opinion, you'll take that on board and constantly trying to develop what you're doing as a person as well?
Yes. Yeah. And it's vital, if you don't have your mentors and your, it's a little bit like your training team in sport, right? They're there for lots of reasons, not just to tell you how to perform a stroke in swimming or a stroke in tennis or whatever it happens to be. They're there for lots of other reasons too. To make that structure of being able to go and do the actual swimming part is really important. And I think business is very similar like that. You need your mentors. You need people that you look up to. And like you say, it can be a little bit lonely because everybody looks at you as if you're supposed to have all of the answers. The COVID, when the COVID shutdown happened, and we're advised by the government, now you're going to need to send everyone home and shut your factories and shut the business. And it felt like that was the end to me. It was really difficult to look beyond, no, this is just a temporary thing, and we'll do this for a period of time, and then we'll get back to work and it'll all be fine, maybe in the end. I mean, we're only just back to work, so we'll see where it all goes. But at the moment, it's pretty good. But at that moment, I've got a board of directors sat looking at me, thinking I am in a better place to make decisions, or I have more information than they do at this moment. Or at least that's how it feels. I think we've got a team of people who are fully aware I had no more insight than perhaps they did. And they're just asking for somebody really to give us a direction, and we'll follow blindly. It's no problem. We don't know what to do either. So let's just follow blindly. And I think, if you've got a really good team of people, which we do, I've not sat on too many different boards, and I've not sat with lots of companies at high level. So I don't know what the board dynamic is in lots of businesses. But I do employ a number of people who have sat on a number of boards, and they all tell me it's an incredible team that we have. And I think they empower you to say, it's okay, you choose the direction, we'll follow. That's good enough for now. And it's hugely humbling when people who are older, more experienced than you are happy to follow the lead, whatever it is. Sometimes you find yourself thinking, well, I must be getting some things right. Okay, I can't be making all bad decisions. So,
talk me through a day in the life of Neil. Do you have a routine that you have to stick to? Are you very routine, or are you kind of everywhere, wherever the day takes you? What's the process to a day?
Yeah, I can't stand routine.
Wow, okay.
At all. So, the biggest driver for routine in my world is the kids start the day, whatever routine they're following. If they're going to school, then It's up at a certain time, get everyone fed, get everyone dressed, do all the things that parents do, yelling and screaming. And for goodness sakes, can we not just get out the house on time today and deliver them off wherever they're going? And I look forward to when school holidays come along and we don't have to do that. So
So you must be quite comfortable being uncomfortable then, if that makes sense, because I think you find when people are very structured and stick to a routine, if anything goes AWOL out of that, it can throw their complete day off. So what I'm gathering is that if something throws you off a bit, it doesn't really take you very long to just navigate through and get back on the path that you want to.
I think that's fair. And I'm very, very comfortable with, I get to the office and I plan to do this, and then I get a phone call or something happens, or you start a conversation with somebody and that conversation leads on to talking about, one or two subjects for maybe 2 or 3 days until you've got to the point where everyone's understanding what the challenge is, how we should change something, or whatever it happens to be. And sometimes that can be a subject that wasn't even on the agenda to discuss until you got to work on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very comfortable with that. I think again, having a good team of people around us, we're able to make sure that the daily disciplines are being done. And so I don't need to get too involved in those daily disciplines. I think if I have a weakness, I have many actually, but one of my biggest weaknesses is that I don't follow any kind of pattern. So I don't have any disciplines in place really with the things that I'm doing on a daily basis. And sometimes that puts me out of touch with certain areas of the business.
How do you take yourself out of it? What do you do if everything's just stressful, too much, like I need to just take myself away? Do you ever do that, or ever get to that point for you?
Only once something's fixed.
Okay. So it's literally you keep going, then it's done, and then you can.
Well, once we've got everybody on track, and we've finally got to a point where, everybody's on the right path now. We're all good. We're settled. We've dealt with whatever the challenge happened to be, and now we're good. And at that point, I'm very likely to go and find my paddleboard and my fishing rod.
Is it paddleboarding? Is that what you do? I like that. Not tennis anymore, really. Then.
Sorry, say again.
Not tennis anymore, really. Then.
Well, tennis is great. I absolutely love the sport, and I love playing. The kids are getting into it now as well. A couple of the kids really, really enjoy it, and they're getting quite good as well. So that's great, but it's with other people. And whereas paddleboarding, I get on my paddleboard and I paddle out into the bay here in Florida, and it's just me and the fishing rod, and really, really helps you just wind down and contemplate, the challenge that you've just been through, and looking at where you felt you performed well, usually reflecting on the things you said that you wish you hadn't, or things that you'd approached in a certain way and wish you'd approached in a different way. And all of those things, and hopefully you learn something, and next time you do something different. But
the downtime's really important, isn't it? Especially after a challenging period. I know for me, going racing at a big competition, I'd assume you go through the same emotions, same adrenaline as you do when you're dealing with a challenging situation in business. And I needed afterwards to relax, unwind, just have that time for myself, mentally then be able to go again. It's something that you kind of think really helps you keep going, stayed motivated for all this time. Not saying that you're old, Neil, because you're not.
Well,
but to stay motivated for all this time, to be able to carry on going again, face the challenge, right, on to the next thing. I've got another thing to do. Do you think that taking that time, going out and just having you time is important?
It is for me. And it, I've got 4 children. You know, Olivia is 11, Mariska and Lexi are 9, and Charlie is 7. So, and obviously Tatiana and my relationship with my wife, and you know, all those things need attention, plus the business. And sometimes it can feel like it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no let up, no space, no time, and expectation constantly on your shoulders. So when you're dealing with a challenge, you know, that expectation piece is fine when it's Tatiana and the children. You know, that comes with the territory here. You don't get to give up on that ever. But with work, you know, I like to have a work-life balance. So it should be balanced, and work should be something that, like you say, like competing in sport, it's a huge push to build up to the big event, then the big event itself. And I'm sure that there's nothing like building up to an Olympics. You know, 4 years to prepare. When do I start? Do I start 3 years out, 2 years out? What's the idea? What works for me? And so on. And then, of course, when it's done, it's like, well, that was hardly worth it. You know, and if you don't take that moment to then regroup, it never switches off. So, you know, I look, so a regular period for me that I really, really look forward to of switching off is Christmas time. You know, the
business fully shuts down over Christmas, doesn't it? I think. Yeah.
And it's the only time
other members of staff enjoy that time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only time the noise stops. You know, otherwise, you know, working in different time zones as well. You know, I'm the working day in the UK starts at 5 o'clock in the morning here, or to 4 o'clock in the morning here, and you know, I wake up to half a day's worth of activity in the UK. So, because sometimes it can feel like it just never stops, and you have to try and find moments where you can just quieten it down a little bit. So, Christmas is a good one for us, and we as a family, we don't talk about work really over Christmas at all. You know, obviously it's a very family time, so it would be really easy to get into work way too much over the Christmas period, but we tend not to. You know, it comes up, but you know, nothing in depth, and usually, it's good. We must try and get into that, you know, when we get back to work in January, and that's sort of as much as you talk about it. So that's a really nice period for me. I think you get that, and then like I say, after a challenge or a big event that you've got going on at work, and you know, I find that
I know, Neil, that you're into other stuff outside of work. So I know you're into your coffee.
Yes.
You like to read. You're into reading about health and diet and nutrition. Like, talk me through that. Like, is that just something that you expand, like that's your thing, you enjoy that? Like coffee, talk me through how you got into nice coffee.
How did I get into nice coffee? I think I really enjoy coffee, and I think one of the things you don't understand with it until you get a bit more in depth with coffee is that good coffee is not an accident. Right, so you'll go somewhere, have a good coffee, and before you understand the whole industry, and I don't understand the whole industry, but before you kind of understand coffee, you think a good one's an accident, or maybe something to do with your taste buds on the day, or something like that. And as you know, it's a very deliberate thing. But you know, and you know, I'm not going to poo-poo Starbucks. It's one of the greatest businesses on the planet, but you know, in terms of an actual product and a coffee itself, it's not a great coffee, but it's better than instant coffee.
Yeah.
Right. And so once you discover, oh, there's really good versions of this thing out there, and I enjoy coffee. So once you realize that, it becomes a pursuit, right? To try and experience and to be able to try and replicate that outside of specialty coffee shops is actually really difficult to do. And actually,
so have you been trying? Have you learned, because you've got a La Marzocco, haven't you? Which,
yes,
people that don't know, is what you would have in a specialty coffee shop. It's the machine that you would go to if you're a barista that wants to make really good coffee at specialty grade level in a shop. You get a La Marzocco, and you have one in your house, don't you? So
I do, yeah.
Have you like gone out, learned everything you need to know about the machine, how you work it, what you need to do to make the coffee taste how it should?
Yes, and I can get the result that I want 95% of the time. I think, things like dialing in a coffee bean that you've just bought, I can't really do that. Okay, so understanding that there's still a lot to learn, and I think it's one of the things that I quite enjoy about it. Is that there's always something new, because it's so experimental. The whole, buying a coffee bean but then making an espresso from it. It's not, you don't just wang it in the machine and hope for the best. Right? It's really quite difficult to do. And so, yeah, for me, that's like a 3 or 4 minute bit of therapy for me, if you like, making a coffee, and making sure it times out right, and you get the result that you want, and that, it looks how you want it to look, it tastes how you want it to taste, and the fact that you quite often don't get it right the first time.
No, yeah.
So you've got to go back and make an adjustment somewhere and do some. So I like that process, that routine of going through that, and trying to get a good result. Yeah, it's wonderful when you go to a specialty coffee shop and you talk to, it's usually the owner of the shop or the barista, and you realize how little you know very, very quickly. And they've always got something that can help you perhaps get a slightly better result. So I just find it fascinating, the whole process, from where the beans are grown, how they're processed, how many different variations of how that's done, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it just captures my imagination a little bit. And I was put onto it by a friend of mine who sort of had some experience in the restaurant industry, and came across some coffee, and he said, I've been doing this is great fun, and it looked like good fun. So I thought, why not?
Journey to go on. The perfect cup of coffee is a good journey. I like it. And talk me through the reading, like diet, nutrition. That's a kind of, for want of a better word, not a hobby, but an interest of yours, isn't it?
It is a huge interest, and I think, yeah, in the modern world, we can get anything we want at any time. It's only, things like COVID, and all of a sudden people couldn't have what they wanted when they wanted it, and all of a sudden that's a problem and a challenge. And so, of course, it's really very easy to go down the wrong path with certain things. So I've struggled since I was in my early 20s. I've struggled with my weight and to keep my weight where I wanted it. And a lot of that was bad habits, the simple things we do that we shouldn't do quite so much of, like drinking and going to the pub and partying and all that stuff. And in your 20s, you don't worry about that stuff too much. You're doing what you do, unless of course you're you and you're training for the Olympics. But ordinary people go to the pub, we go to work, we party too hard, and we do all that stuff. And then you get to a point where you don't want to carry extra weight. That's not good. It doesn't make you feel good. And so you try to do some of the right things according to what you understand the right things to be, and they don't work. And that becomes really frustrating.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more of a, what's the puzzle here? What's the challenge? And why am I, why does it not work doing the things we're told we should do, and that should automatically fix things, and then it doesn't? And so it really just captured my imagination, and I was in my early 30s when I read my first book on diet and some of the myths around what we're told, and the food industry latch onto things. And I don't think it's deliberate deception. I'm not of the opinion that that's how industries function necessarily. Not out to give misinformation, to do the wrong things. I think you're genuinely trying to follow a path, and perhaps the guidance that comes from authorities like the World Health Organization and so on. And then once you start reading about the history of how diets got to where it is, and our understanding of what we should or shouldn't be doing from a dietary perspective, you suddenly realize that there's way more questions than answers in the whole piece. So again, it's more of a fascinating, wow, this is how we got here, and we're being told we should do this and not eat very much of this, but really understanding whether there's actually much in the way of basis behind that information. And it turns out that, there's a lot of gaps in that industry. And we're things like red meat's really bad for you. Okay, I think most people would say, yeah, I understand that to be true. That's how it should be. And yet there's almost, well, when I say almost, there is no evidence backing that up. There's ideology. There's passion from, say, vegetarians and vegans because they have an ulterior motive beyond health to want to believe that it's good or bad. But actually, when you get into it, there's little to no scientific evidence that actually backs up that theory. And so the reality is we don't know whether it's good or bad. I can't tell you it's good, but I can't tell you it's bad either, from what I've read, because everything you come across, you realize there's another side to that argument somewhere.
Yeah. It's interesting that you like to learn different things, not just about business, not just about what's going on strategy-wise or the best business books out there. Is it something that you like to learn other aspects because it takes your mind off, or it's just something that you're really interested in?
I think it's just interesting. I just find it fascinating. I think not too sure. Conscious things I do around business. I love the industry in which I work, and I consider it to be two industries too. One is manufacturing, and one is the construction world. And I love building. I love construction. Been in and around it my entire life, really, with what my dad did for a living. And as soon as I left school, the first things I did was work on building sites, and I like carpentry in particular. I really enjoy cutting up bits of wood and making holes in it and all that kind of stuff, very much a boy from that perspective. But yeah, construction in general, and architecture, I think is just fantastic. So, but I try to get a balanced amount of information from those industries. I don't want to know too much about what I should and shouldn't do in, say, manufacturing, for example, because then I'll just make the same mistakes everyone else is carrying on doing, and I won't ever challenge some of the norms. One of the things we've done at Origin is put in place the ability to be able to manufacture to the customer's time frame.
Yeah.
So we called it your lead time, not ours, which it's kind of descriptive of what it is. But essentially, our clients can come and order doors and windows on whatever their time frame is, even if that's a very, very short time frame. Say, I want product tomorrow. And I know theoretically many people have tried to break the system that we run at Origin and tell us that it's not sustainable and so on. And I guess with traditional thinking, that is true. But we've also learned that that doesn't have to be true. There is a way of managing the flow of work, provided you don't get in the way of the flow of work. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you know, the more you try to confine something and to control something and to make everything fit in certain slots to match your ideology, the worse things get generally, is my experience with business. So allowing work to flow and not allowing work to get to a point, or a batch of work to get to a point where it's an unmanageable amount of work, right? So we liken that to things like, well, the best example of it is the inbox on email, right? It's perfectly manageable if you're dealing with the email as it comes in and as every single one comes in. But take 3 or 4 days off work and all of a sudden there's 400 emails to go through, most of which you have to delete. The rest of it, you need to read all of them. And now all of a sudden I need, say, 3 or 4 hours of uninterrupted time to go through that inbox. I know I'm not going to get 3 or 4 hours uninterrupted, ever. The phone's going to ring. I'm going to have a video call with somebody. The kids will want something. Tatiana will want something. I need to go and do something else. That's an unmanageable amount of work in any one time. And so the idea and with our manufacturing was to allow the flow of work to happen consistently and not to try and control too much. You know, so if we don't choose what we manufacture next and we allow our customers to do that, that gives them a flexibility that they can't have elsewhere.
So changing the mindset around how things are done and not being constrained to what everyone else is doing, what you've read somewhere else, actually has given you a USP that's massive, really.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Again, you know, coming back to, we didn't know what we were doing when we sat down or we didn't know what we were getting into really when we sat down and designed the bifold doors, the first product we had. And so we didn't know why we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Lots of people told us why we shouldn't, which was fascinating. And I there's no greater motivator for me when somebody tells me I can't do something. Oh, yeah. Good. I'm glad that's your view. Now just watch, because I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do this until I've shown you that you're wrong. Doesn't always work out, of course. You do sometimes end up being the one that's wrong, but you know, I find that quite motivating, to be told you can't do something. And then, of course, like I said earlier, you know, not being constrained by what you know, because you don't know. So not being afraid of what you don't know and just doing it anyway, because you have a vision and a goal to chase it. So, you know, things like the manufacturing, coming up with your lead time, not hours. I didn't know not to ask the question as to why we couldn't do it. And working with Daniel and saying to him at the time, you know, he was helping us reduce our lead time a little bit and get a bit more organized in manufacturing. And I just challenged him and said, well, why can't we just do this instead? And, you know, the measure of great people is he stepped away from what he already knew and allowed the question to be asked. And I think most people wouldn't have that. It just took what it is, because you can't do it. Yeah,
you put the barrier up. But
whereas with Dan, he just said, I'm not sure. Can I go away and think about it? And then obviously the evolution around the thinking and maybe what we could and couldn't do with this started to happen. And then internally, without communicating that to customers, we were playing with different things in the business and seeing if we could get a system working whereby we didn't necessarily have to control every aspect. There are lots of things we do need to control, but the flow of work isn't one.
Do you find yourself asking lots of questions? Are you like always asking questions like, can we do this? Why can't we do that? Are you an inquisitive soul?
Yes. Yeah. And I think I pick up on when we're saying, no, we can't do something because that's the preconceived notion more than it can be changed. And I'm more likely to push people in terms of challenges to say, well, look, I know you're saying that can't be done like that, but how about we give it a try anyway and just see what happens?
I found always when I was swimming, I asked a lot of questions of my coaches. Why can I do this? Why am I doing that? Can I try this? And sometimes it came across as me being difficult, but yeah. I don't think that wasn't the driver behind me asking. Me asking is because actually I'm interested. I want to know. I want to try something different. I want to experiment. I want to grow, rather than it being, I think people that don't have a mindset of wanting to drive forward don't ask enough questions and see it as you being difficult. You just need to do what everyone else is doing, toe the line. And I don't think that's a mindset that helps create anything that's different to what's already out there.
Yeah, and when you're looking to do something a little bit different, you know, sport's wonderful in a number of ways, but it's also so very difficult because unlike business where there's degrees of success, in sport it's pretty definitive, right?
Yeah.
Particularly when you get to the higher level, you're either winning the big events or you're not. Okay, and you're looking for marginal gains, you know, and there's probably no greater example than that of the Sky cycling team, and you know, we've all read those. And we've all read those stories, and they're just jaw-droppingly inspirational and brilliant. You should be allowed to ask questions. I mean, I remember playing tennis and asking questions of my coach, and him saying, I want you to do this. And me saying, well, why? I needed to understand why so that I could understand what it was we were trying to achieve. And I remember on occasions, coaches being really frustrated with the fact that I've pushed back and asked why. But I needed the why. You know, it was really important for me to understand. So I think, yes, I do challenge. I do like to ask questions. I probably could ask more questions. Sometimes I get a bit of a tunnel vision on how I think something should be. And I can't leave it and understand that there's actually several different ways of getting to the same place and let it go a little bit. But that's what the team is for. The team's there to let you know it's good just to let us get on with it. We'll deliver it for you in the same way.
I've kept you quite a while now, Neil, but I just want to ask you one last question that I'm asking everybody that I've been talking to. And it's around soft skills and transferable skills. Because for me, as an athlete coming into business, I don't have any business acumen whatsoever in a skill set sense of I don't know how to do accounts. I've not done a degree at university, but I found that a lot of the skills that I had as an athlete do transfer really well into business. And I was just wondering, from your perspective as a CEO, what would you say that you see in people that's a transferable skill that anybody in any industry can use to be successful?
Aptitude and attitude. And I will employ that any day of the week over experience and bits of paper that tell me somebody can do something. Those are important, of course, and you know, that's not to belittle people's achievements and you know, certifications for certain things, but you know, it's incredible. You can take, we have an example here in the US business. When I first moved out here, we brought with us an au pair from the Czech Republic, and it was a friend of Tatiana's sister, had a daughter who'd worked as a nanny in Germany for a little while, went back to school, wasn't really having fun, was looking to go somewhere and be an au pair again. Came highly recommended, and we met her, brought her over here, and she worked for me as an au pair for 4 years. It was only supposed to be 1 year, but she's a wonderful young girl, and just an unbelievable work ethic. You know, she could achieve anything she wants to achieve. You know, whether she finds her passion and what she wants to do, I don't know, and quite how she ended up just being an au pair, I'm not entirely sure either, because if you have a work ethic like hers, it's the sort of thing you're looking for as an employer or in sport or whatever it happens to be. It's just somebody who understands, you know, we said we're getting up in the morning and we're going to do it, so we're getting up in the morning, we're going to do it. I'm going to put 100% into it until such time that it's time to knock off. Yeah. And not everybody has that. You know, lots of people find it difficult to do that when they're not motivated. And she worked here for 4 years. She then, you know, I said to her, look, if you ever don't want to be a nanny again, I definitely hire you in the business. Just let me know. And after 4 years, she said, I really want to do something different now. And I said, great, I'll have a job for you. I'll make a job for you. It doesn't really matter. I'll find you a position. And she started off in the business, and we put her in lots of different departments and just said, look, just get used to the business. It was fine. It was all part of training her and exposing her to what's going on with what we do. And within 4 months of her starting with us, I now have her running our entire inventory and purchasing for us in the US. Now, we're not a huge business here, and we're still growing the business, but from a standing start of zero understanding and zero skills in terms of the actual job that she does, the only thing she had was a good attitude and a good aptitude. And she is excelling in the role. You know, she replaced a lady that had been working in inventory management for her whole career. This lady was in her 50s. And Radka performs the job several hundred times better.
It's like they say, isn't it? You can't like out train a bad attitude. Like attitude is key to everything. It really is.
I think so.
That, Neil. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me and listening to all your insights on everything that you've been through in business. Has been awesome. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a fun chat, actually. I've enjoyed it.